Well, thanks for tolerating me for the next few minutes here to be able to speak. Well, I'll just tell you who I am. I'm Bryan Stalling, and my wife and I started a nonprofit in Branson in 2008 called Elevate Branson. Originally, we were called Jesus Was Homeless, and I'll tell you a little bit about that story. But we like to call ourselves ordinary, dysfunctional people. We did not set out to start a nonprofit, so I have no PhD in this. This is things that I've learned by trial and error, and what has been working, and we're constantly learning different things. But what happened was I was working for our local phone company at the time was CenturyTel. We then became CenturyLink later on, and God kind of got a hold of me and said, Bryan, you need to put on a Thanksgiving dinner for the poor in Branson. We had a few restaurants that would do like a Thanksgiving Day lunch, but it cost money. And then nobody could get there because we don't have any public transportation, much like Bolivar. And so I really had this stereotypical lens of, everybody that's going to come is lazy, addicts or alcoholics, they don't want to work or anything like that. So we partnered with some people, and we got a bus, and we bussed people in, and it was small. We had probably 50 people come. Part of that was our church small group that was kind of helping as well. But what I found out from that was that people were very appreciative. They were thankful, and it was small enough where I could actually sit and talk to them and hear their story. And what I came to understand was that they were just like me, except that they didn't have a support system around them. And so when they had an explosion happen in their life, they had nobody there to kind of prop them up or support them. And so they ended up, many of them ended up in Branson motels. So if you guys have been around for a while in this area, back in the 90s, Branson had this big boom, and a lot of motels were built. We've had very few built since then. So a lot of those older motels now, 30, some of them 40 years old, have become housing for people. And really they're owned by a bunch of slumlords who don't put any money back into them. And because of the lack of housing in Branson, affordable housing, and especially now with VRBO stuff, so if there's a $150,000 house that comes up on the market, it gets snatched up like that, and it's put out as a VRBO, which then continues to keep people from being able to afford to live in these houses.
What is that?
A vacation rental.
Oh.
B&B, Airbnb type thing. And so it's kind of forced our workforce, our local workforce, to live in these motels. So we have probably anywhere from 1,500 to 2,000 people living in dilapidated motels, and complete families in there. We have over 400 kids that are picked up by the local school system there every morning for school that live in these motels. And these are just a standard motel room from back in the 90s. So it's not like there's kitchens in there or anything else. So we're talking about, really some poor individuals. And they're expensive. They're $800 to $1,000 a month. So anyhow, so at this Thanksgiving dinner, I found this out. And afterwards, we said, you know what? We can't wait another year to do something. We need to do something now. And my wife and I were both working full-time jobs. I was at the phone company, like I said. But we decided we would start delivering sack lunch meals to people that lived in these motels one night a week, just to build a relationship with them, just to hear more of their stories, to see how we could come alongside them. And that's kind of how all of Elevate Branson started, and then it's gotten way out of hand since then. But when we started doing that, we had some people come alongside us and they said, hey, we want to support what you're doing, and we want to give you some money to cover the cost of the food. We were passing out, we started with like 48 meals in our kitchen, and people asked me, why 48? What was the number? Was it had some biblical reference or something? No, it was the buns were packaged like 16 to a package at Sam's Club, and so 48 was the number. And so they messed everything up because they wanted to give us a check to help cover those costs, but then they wanted a receipt. And I'm like, well, I can't give you a receipt. I mean, this is just me. We're just out here doing this. And so we ended up having to form a 501c3 so we could give him a receipt for his tax deductions. So we initially started out calling it Jesus Was Homeless. And the reason for that was when we would knock on somebody's door, many people just had this lack of hope, and they had all this guilt and shame on them because they were poor and living in a motel. And so we called it Jesus Was Homeless to kind of lift their spirits up to say, hey, even Jesus was homeless, so the King of Kings, right? And we based that on Scripture in Matthew. Well, fast forward about 12 years, Branson, not unlike Springfield and other areas, has seen a huge increase in panhandling. And so Branson is a great destination for the panhandler because they can stand on a corner and make the tourists feel guilty and get money. And so when you have the word homeless in your name, many of the locals felt like we were the problem, that they were coming here because of that one sack lunch meal that we gave away on a Thursday night. Also, by this time, we had expanded, and I'll share some of the other things that we do, and so we were really broader for the community, and so we changed our name to Elevate Branson. And so that was kind of the basis for that name change. But really, our goal setting out was just to help people find hope. So many of them were so hopeless. So what do? I would boil it down to some of these core concepts. We have a broad variety of outreach and support services. Now again, we didn't start there. We started with just that sack lunch meal, and things evolved as we were passing those out and building relationships. People would say, hey, will you pray for me? I said, absolutely. We had one guy came up to me and he said, pray for me. I've put in 20 job applications and I haven't heard anything. And even during the recession time, there were still a lot of jobs in Branson. And I was like, well, how can he put in 20 applications and not hear anything? Well, he had his best Budweiser t-shirt on and his cut-off jeans. And I said, I think he just doesn't know what's required to go and interview, to fill out an application. Somebody hasn't taught him those things. And so we brought a job training program to Branson. Then, following that, we discovered that even though they were trained to get employment, that if they were dealing with chronic health issues, like many of those in poverty do, they didn't have access to health services. So we added that component. So over the years, we've just added different programs and services where now we have a pretty broad spectrum of those. So when we're doing that, though, we like to run it through this lens. And if you're familiar with Jim Collins' Good to Great book, this is one that I really love because of these three principles. You kind of look at what are you passionate about? And we are extremely passionate about empowering people to succeed and find their purpose. That is what we are very passionate about. So then you have to look at what can we be the best in the world at with that. We feel like we can be the best in the world at addressing poverty in a different way and educating the why behind that. Because everybody thinks that poverty is financial, and there's so many more layers to it. I love what James Whitford at True Charity, he says that poverty is complex versus complicated. So complicated would be like building a jet engine and trying to figure out how it's going to power a jet, right? That's complicated. But once you figure it out, you can replicate it and you can put that jet engine on all kinds of things. Complex, you can't really replicate it, right? It's constantly changing. There's different things. Part of that's because we're dealing with humans. My boss, when I was at CenturyLink, he used to say, this would be a great place to work if it wasn't for all the employees and customers. And sometimes we hear that about church, right? It'd be a great place to go if it wasn't for all the people. And so when you're dealing with individuals, one one component or one solution for one person won't necessarily fit the next person. And so knowing the why behind that does help. And then what drives your economic engine? And so for us, it's donations, grants, and our own revenue. So what we have seen over the last few years, and what statistics are showing too now, is really since 2018 when they changed the tax law, a lot of individuals now aren't giving like they used to, because even though they didn't itemize their taxes mentally, they felt like if they gave $50, they needed to save that receipt. Now they don't have to. So what statistics are showing is that individual giving is going down, or number of individuals that give is going down, and that's across the board, churches, nonprofits. But the amount that people give is going up, right? So your people of wealth are giving more money, but there are fewer of those than your individuals. So for us, it was important to figure out ways that, as a nonprofit, we could generate our own revenue. So we look at everything that we do, including a program, through this lens. And that in his book, Good to Great, he calls that your hedgehog. What's your hedgehog? And then just you kind of stay in that mindset. So it's a great book. I would encourage you. It's a business book, but it applies to churches and nonprofits because we have to operate as a business. All right, so the other concepts is we connect, coordinate, and collaborate with others in our community to meet the most important needs. And I think that the thing that you have to recognize here is that we want to do it without duplicating services. We don't need 10 nonprofits in the same community doing the same thing just because we can't get along or because we think our way is better. So we can come alongside them, and I think that's really important, especially in a church setting where you might have somebody passionate about wanting to do something and help something. If it's already been done in the community, direct them to where they can come alongside. So if COM's already doing it, direct them over here to COM and say, hey, they're doing something similar. See if you can help them, make them better. But that's really important. So we partner with about 150 different agencies in Branson and Springfield. The next thing we do is we help individuals become independent contributing members of our community. So we want to empower them to be a part of the very community they live in. So we're going to come alongside with them. We're going to build relationships. We're going to give them the tools that's needed to do that. And I'm going to share with you some of what those tools. But we require that they have skin in the game, basically. Whether that's cash or whether that's labor, but they have something invested. And then we help families thrive in the Branson area. So our vision is for every individual to know hope, dignity, and purpose through the love of Jesus. That's our goal. When they walk through our door, we want everybody to know that. And then our vision is to elevate our community by empowering our neighbors to reach their full potential. Now I'm gonna say this now by defining it moving forward. We believe, and you heard Micah say a little bit of this, that God has created everyone for a purpose. They may not know their purpose. He's given everybody gifts and talents. And so we so strongly believe in that we're going to help them find that. And you're going to hear me talk a lot about work. And so we believe that those gifts and talents come through work, but not the kind of work necessarily that we all think of, right? It's not necessarily that everybody can stand behind a cash register for 8 hours at Walmart, but they have gifts and talents of work that they can do outside of that. And so that's kind of how we define empowering our neighbors. All right, this is something I'd love for you to do if you have a cell phone, because I'm very cheap, or I should say inexpensive or frugal. And so I want to do a quick poll here, and I'm trying this thing out because it's free, and so I want to see if it works. So see if we can do this. Let me know if everybody is everybody there on your browser, and then enter that code and see if it pops up. Everybody there? Okay. So,
What was it?
go back.
Yeah,
Okay.
please.
It's type your question, is that what you're looking for? Where it says type your question now?
I don't know.
Restored conference?
I want the poll, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, it opens up immediately to
Okay.
that, type your
All right.
question.
Yeah,
All
right.
right,
Oh,
so-
type, it
Ask
does?
the first
It doesn't?
one.
Yeah.
But
Oh,
you-
it should,
But
it's
if we
supposed
go
to.
over,
But if
the
you go
polls
over
at
to
the top.
polls, yeah. to top.
Well, this may not work then.
There's no active polls. at the
It
moment.
was supposed to, like, we type in that code and then it was supposed to
Yeah,
work,
then
so.
you go over
Well,
to
it says
polls.
restored conference,
Did you do
but
that?
it says no active polls.
Polls.
Oh, just this right here.
Yeah.
But
No
it's,
active poll.
that's supposed to pop up once you type that code. Okay, well,
Yeah.
we'll do it by
Next-
hands.
And next is a Q&A. Go to Q&A.
Yeah, no, apparently it didn't work, so.
Well,
Technology. All right, so I just wanted to get kind of a show of hands. In this room, does your church or ministry give things away?
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Show of hands. So about half the room.
yeah,
Okay.
for sure.
So here was my question I really wanted to see, though. Do you believe that most churches and nonprofits, well, I showed you the answers, empower those being served? And it was going to give you a survey here that we could fill out so we could get the what the group thought. But do you believe that most churches and nonprofits empower those that are being served? Some say no.
Sometimes.
Sometimes, okay. Do you believe that they change their quality of life for the individuals receiving?
Yes.
Do you believe that they relieve poverty?
No, I don't think we do.
No.
No.
Okay. Do you believe that they improve the local community?
Yes.
Okay. Well, contrary to that, they don't. And if you look back over history, trillions, I mean literally trillions of dollars has been spent on trying to relieve poverty. And that needle has not moved. It's probably even gone up now after COVID. We just don't have the most recent information. But it hasn't moved. In fact, most charities weaken those being served, foster dishonest relationships, erode the work ethic of the individuals receiving things, and deepen the dependency. And so, the question comes to mind, why would that be? How can that be? Because if that person's hungry, I'm meeting a need, or if that person's cold, I'm meeting a need with a coach. So why or how could that be negative like that?
Most of these agencies aren't helping with their spiritual needs.
Yeah. But if you think about this, we're creating this dependency progression, and Bob Lupton came up with this in the book Toxic Charity that's back here. This is a must read for anybody in the church, anybody in a nonprofit world. You really need to read this book. I like this one so much better than others because a lot of the other books talk about third world country helping. This one's more US based helping, and it really is a must read. But we create this dependency, this progression here, and think about it like this. When we give once, you elicit appreciation, right? I mean, think about a food pantry. Hey, first time guest, here's some food. Oh, thank you very much. We're so hungry. We needed this food. When you give twice, you create anticipation. It's like, I can't wait until Friday because they give out free steaks at the food pantry. And then the next one is give 3 times and you create expectation. And it's Friday, So I should be getting free steaks because every Friday they give out free steaks, so it's Friday. And then when you give 4 times, it becomes entitlement. And the individual says, it's Friday, they better have those free steaks. And then you give 5 times and you establish dependency. It's Friday and I need those free steaks because I can't eat that other food. It's not near as good as the steaks. And that is what happens over time when we give things out. So I said Good to Great is a great book to read. Toxic Charity. The other book that I would strongly recommend you read is What Every Church Member Should Know About Poverty. It's by Ruby Payne.
Oh, okay.
And it's a much easier read than some of her more PhD style books, I guess, but it really gives you the basis of what to expect from an individual that's coming to your church looking for something. You're looking to lead them to Jesus. They're looking for free food or whatever it is they're asking for. And what you really need to do is meet in the middle and have a relationship. And so the book kind of walks you through a little bit of that. But it's also helpful to understand poverty and some of those driving forces that we're going to talk about. So I said that we believe everything comes through the value of work. And we get that, just like Micah pointed out, there's several references in the Bible, starting off with Genesis. So God looked at his creation and said, I need rest because I've done all this work. So he was exhausted. He was tired because he was working. And so if we see that in the very beginning of the Bible, we need to apply it all throughout. And so then we go down to verse 15. He creates man, and he says to man, I'm going to put you in the garden to work it, to tend it, to manage it, to oversee it, but I want you to work. And so that's kind of the principle, and I'm not going to read all these other ones to you, but that's the principle that we structure everything we do is around work. Now, my favorite one is this one, because Micah showed Matthew 25, where we talk about giving somebody something to eat and something to drink and visiting them in prison. Now, that verse doesn't say we did it over and over and over again, right? And so a lot of times people struggle with this last one, which comes from 2 Thessalonians. From Paul, he says, even while we were with you, we gave you this command. Those unwilling to eat, or unwilling to work, shall not eat. And I think the key there is the word unwilling. There's a difference between unwilling and not being able to. And so I love that verse because that really sets the precedent, I feel like, from somebody who needs something versus somebody who wants something. And then, of course, Nelson Mandela says, without equal exchange, any man or institution that tries to rob me of my dignity will lose. So we believe that when we don't provide an opportunity for people to work or earn what they get, that we rob them of their dignity and value. That, again, based on God created us with value. God created us to have that worth that even Micah talked about in his presentation. So before we can help somebody, we have to understand why they're not working. If they come into our food pantry or our clothing store and they want something for free, we need to find out why they want it for free. Why are they not able to earn that? Why are they not employed? And there's many reasons, right? We have mental illness, we have physical disabilities, we have lots of reasons, but we need to find that. We also need to understand why they're in the position they're in, and is it based on decisions they've made? And so we have this world economy, and when I go to Walmart, if I want shampoo, I have to pay for shampoo, right? Walmart's going to provide a product to me. I'm going to give them money, and there's an exchange there. I can't walk into Walmart and say, hey, I don't have any money, I need your free shampoo. Doesn't work that way because we have this world economy system, right? And that world economy is based really on three classes, right? We have the upper class, which is a class of wealth. We have a middle class, which is where 90% of us operate. Business operates there, churches operate there, social services operate there. I mean, individuals and most Americans operate in this middle class. And then we have the lower class or the poverty class. And within each of those classes, there's these driving forces that we make our foundations based, or our decisions based on those foundations of driving forces. And that is also where we'll spend a lot of our time around those driving forces. So we need to know where, one, a person in poverty is spending their time, and two, why they're making the decisions that they're making based on the class that they're in. For somebody to move from lower class to upper class or middle class, we've got to understand what are the roadblocks, what are the barriers, how are they making their decisions, and why. If we don't understand that, throwing money at the problem doesn't solve it. That's why it hasn't solved it. Throwing a code or providing a house for free doesn't solve it if we don't understand how their decisions moving forward are going to work. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. So in lower or poverty class, decisions are made based on survival first. What's it going to take for me to get through today? What do I need? Who do I need to be around me? What social service office can provide what I need today? Which is also on relationships, because if that social service office is 3 miles away, who do I know that can give me a ride there? So relationships are the means to survival in lower class. Followed by, which is you would think is kind of contrary, but oftentimes we see this around tax time when we go out to the motels. We'll see people living in a motel, barely making it by, and they'll have the biggest TV on their wall, right? Or they'll have their beer and cigarettes. And I'll get people in middle class that say, well, how come if they have money for a big screen TV, we're out here helping them? Or how come if they have money for beer and cigarettes, we're out here helping them? Entertainment is the key to relationships. So if I have the biggest TV on the wall, everybody in that motel is going to come down to hang out with me to watch movies or watch sports or watch whatever on my big screen TV. Or I may have the most obnoxious but outgoing personality and people want to be around me. And so it's whatever draws people in to help foster those relationships so that you can survive. It's all about relationship and poverty. Then we go to middle class, and middle class is all about work, right? Achievement. Who do I work for? How successful am I? And then what do I own because of that work? How big's my house? What kind of car do I drive? Do I own a boat? Where do I vacation? Those types of things. And then upper class is all about, wealth, financial first, but then it's about political and social connections. Who's the governor or senator that can connect me to the people I need in case I have an agenda? Who are the famous social people I can be connected to? So it's really quite different when you look at upper class and lower class. And so that's why most people fall into that middle class. So for time spent for the upper class is usually with lawyers, accountants. This is where you're going to see people spend a lot of their time. They may fly internationally and travel and do world trips. Again, it's all about connections. Middle class, families, friends, sports clubs, gyms, maybe volunteering. They have the opportunity to work on their mental health by going to counselors. They can afford to do that, or they may have health insurance that provides that. but this is kind of where they'll spend their time. And then in lower class, this is where they're going to spend a lot of their time. They're going to be hitting these social service agencies, probably spending their time navigating the criminal justice system or trying to line up transportation to get to these places. They'll spend a lot of their time there. So, a lot of false beliefs around poverty. Again, I was one of those. I've just assumed they were all lazy. Why can't they just go get a job? Also, that it's all about money. But the working definition of poverty is the extent to which an individual does without resources. So as I said earlier, what I learned at that first Thanksgiving dinner was the majority of people just didn't have a support system around them. And a support system is also a resource. And so if you don't have people in your life, especially if you don't have somebody that has modeled what things look like in your life, you're really going to struggle. And a lot of this comes from the breakdown of the family. So in the 60s, late 60s, we had the sexual revolution, which created this kind of do whatever makes you feel good attitude. But it really broke down the family. And so all of a sudden now in the 70s, we had single moms with latchkey kids. Well, single moms, to be able to survive, needed to go into the workforce. So mom goes into the workforce, latchkey kid comes home after school, unsupervised, no mom or no parent there to model what certain things look like. So like the gentleman I met in the motel that had put in 20 applications and he's wearing his best clothes, nobody had ever modeled to him how he needed to dress for an interview. And so since the 70s, we've really seen this entire breakdown of the family, and we're seeing individuals get passed through the school system that the school's not focused on teaching them how to dress for a job. The school's teaching them on science, math, English. So who's teaching them those things? Nobody. And so they're struggling not only getting a job, but keeping a job. So let's talk a little bit about those lack of resources, because this is really important to understand. So there's emotional resources. Emotional resources is the resource that allows you to process situations without being destructive to yourself or others. And so a lot of times you'll have an individual from poverty come in with his girlfriend, and they've been kicked out of their motel or kicked out of something because they've destroyed the place, or they've gotten in trouble there, and that's from a lack of emotional resource, being able to handle that situation. And that's crucial to help somebody move forward. They've got to be able to control their emotions. But if they've never seen that modeled for them, how do we just expect them to do it? And it's kind of a hidden rule in middle class that we expect that to happen. So then the next one is mental resources. So mental resources is about having the cognitive ability to process things, to be able to fill out paperwork, to read, to write, some of those cognitive things that you need to be able to use in the workplace, to be able to communicate properly, to be able to think through certain things. A lot of times we'll say they didn't have any common sense, but they really just didn't have the cognitive, the mental resources that they need. Oh, there we go. Spiritual resources. This one's huge. As I said earlier, oftentimes we'd knock on somebody's door and they would just look hopeless. And when you don't have a spiritual resource, you don't believe in a higher power. We believe in God, right? But if you don't have that, what offers you hope? The only thing that offers you hope is what you can do and what you can control. And if they're in poverty and they're desolate, obviously that's not working out too well. And so it's critical that they have a spiritual resource to move forward. Physical's another big one. Oftentimes, we'll see people in poverty that have, especially if they have any type of criminal background, they have burned all their bridges, right? And so they're isolated. It's just them. They have no more family left in their life. And so if they end up having a physical issue, then and they have no physical resources to get them mobility, how do they move forward? How do they get from point A to point B if they can't walk? If they can't have that communication skill because they've had a stroke. I mean, whatever it may be, physical resources are also a biggie. And then, of course, support resources is one of the biggest ones that I feel like people need in their life, because it goes back to having individuals around you, family, friends, connections, people that can be there when those explosions happen in your life. You need to have those support systems. Also, we talked about relationship resources, people that model behavior for you. Mentors are huge in people's lives. Oftentimes, kids in poverty sit in the back of the classroom at school. The teacher kind of bypasses them a lot of times, so they don't really have a teacher or a coach as a role model in their life. Their parents probably not the role model in their life. And if they're not connected to a church, they don't have a youth pastor as a role model. So who's their role model in their life? And so when they grow up and they get out of school, if they complete school, they've had nobody to model behavior for them through those years. But we often think everybody should know what we know, right? Because we had those things. Often what I see is we view people as though the way we were raised. So I was raised in a two-parent household. My parents invested in me. And so when I look at people, I'm looking through that lens. I'm not looking through the lens of not being raised in a two-parent household, not being raised in a household where the parent was never engaged, because I don't know what that experience is. And so that's the difficulty when we view that way, is that we can't understand why they don't know what we know. Does that make sense? Okay, then we have the lack of hidden rule knowledge. So a hidden rule is a unspoken rule or unwritten behavior of a particular either economic class or group of people. So let me give you an example. So a few years back, we planted a church in Branson, and we had 98% of the people that were coming were those in poverty. And in middle class church, there's this unwritten rule that if your phone rings, you quickly silence it, right? I mean, we don't want the phones going off in church. In poverty, they didn't know that hidden rule. So it wasn't unusual that they would answer, not only the phone would ring, they would answer it and put it on speakerphone and have a conversation while you're giving the message up there. So, but that was a hidden rule of that class. And so they hadn't been in a middle class church environment, so they didn't know that rule. So that's an example of a hidden rule. And when you don't have those, the knowledge of those rules, it's really hard to succeed in middle class, because what happens when you're in a middle class church and somebody answers their phone and puts it on speaker and starts having a conversation, right? Everybody looks and gets all, well, what are you doing? Turn that off, They get all grumpy, and so all of a sudden that person feels like the outcast and not coming back. So if that happens in the workplace, guess what? They just don't show up the next day for work. So knowledge of hidden rules is important. Of course, financial resources we talked about. Financial is usually just really being able to purchase the goods and services that you need, not what you want. And oftentimes, financial is the last resource. So what I mean by that is, if you have financial resources, but you don't have those other resources, guess what? It's not long before you have no financial resource either. Right. So you need to have the other resources to really understand financial resources. And then the last one is the most important one, I believe. And that is the language and formal register. And that is having the ability to succeed in the workforce and the ability to plan. If you don't have that ability, it is going to be extremely difficult. Because remember, we said that in lower class, survival is the driving force. So survival is surviving today, not tomorrow, today. And so if I don't have a formal register or understanding of the formal register, and I can't plan tomorrow, then how do I ever get ahead? I'm just talking about today, right? I don't even think about tomorrow. And we're going to break that down because it is so crucial to working with people in poverty. So there are 5 different registers of language. And a register really refers to the formality of speaking or writing the language. Register is really what is describing the particular situation. It's the goal of communication. It also can be what fosters the relationship between the speaker and listener. So understanding the registers are very important. So the frozen register is something we're all familiar with. The frozen register would be like the national anthem, the Lord's Prayer, wedding vows. The Bible is a frozen register, right? It's unchanging. It's the set way all the time. The consultative register is it's kind of in between a formal and a casual, but it's usually like a professional to an individual. So like doctor to patient or attorney to client. You're having two-way information, but a lot of it's technical information one way, asking questions the other way. Does that make sense? Kind of like your newscast would be like a consultative. And then intimate, we all know this about intimate register. It's between husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend. What's interesting about intimate, it can also be towards your pets. So a lot of people in poverty have pets. I don't know if you've noticed that. There's a couple of reasons why they have pets. One is companionship, obviously, right? If they have nobody else in their life, it kind of fills in that intimate. The other reason is protection. Depending on where they live, a pet is very important to them because a lot of them are pit bulls. I don't know if you've run across that, but it's protection. And makes it very difficult when they've been evicted from a place and they have a pet and you're trying to help them get relocated to find a place that will take pets. And we've had some situations in Branson where they've closed a whole motel down because it wasn't up to code, and we've had to relocate families with pets, and it's challenging. But put it in this perspective, if it's like your protection, it's somebody asking you to give up your gun. Right? Because that dog or that animal is their protection to say, hey, you can live over here, but you can't bring your gun. Well, if you're a gun advocate, probably not going to do that. So intimate is to your pets. We have a therapy dog at Elevate Branson, and he stays with my wife and I. And so intimate conversation for me is like, hey, little buddy, you're a good boy, So that's kind of how that would work in the intimate language. But then the two that we're going to land on here is formal and casual. So formal register is how the majority of us talk. Middle class operates in formal, church operates in formal, schools operate in formal. Social services operate in formal, so all of your network of help for people in poverty operate in formal. And formal is, think of it as a beginning, middle, and end. We use exact definitions. We use the proper vocabulary for the points that we're trying to get across. And it's often used to show respect for somebody, right? I mean, when we're in the workplace, we're going to be very detailed about how we communicate to our employer. It's also it will weave the cause and effect throughout the story. Like if I'm a supervisor and I'm trying to explain something to an employee, I would say, if we don't do it this way, then this is what happens, right? So it's very linear cause and effect versus casual register. So casual register is a language we use among friends. It's like, hey bud, what's going on today? I saw you down at the grocery store and look like you're doing whatever, you know. So a casual register is just, you know, what we would use in our social settings. The difference for those in poverty is casual register is where they camp out most of the time, and it's a very random episodic storytelling. So what I mean by that is when I first started delivering these meals to the motel, I would say to somebody, hey, how's your day going? Or how's your week going? And I would get this long dissertation. You know, at first it might be, well, 3 days ago I was at Walmart, and then yesterday I went to the DMV, and then last week I was at Paul's house. It's like I was trying to follow this conversation, chasing this bouncing ball, and it was going all over the place. At the end of the conversation, I was emotionally drained. I was like, holy cow, I don't know what he just said, how his day went, you know? I was like, but that's casual register. Also, what we have to understand is in formal register, we use about 17,000 words. We've been exposed to about 30 million. In casual register, somebody in poverty only uses about 400 to 800 words. So think about how that translates in the workplace. If I say to my boss, or my boss says something to me, hey, Brian, I need you to take out the trash. You got it, dude. I'll do whatever you need. You know, my boss could look at that as being disrespectful. Hey, don't call me dude in the workplace. But that's casual register. Or my boss may tell me something technical. Hey, I need you to take a comprehensive look at this piece of machinery over here and give me a detailed, organized graph on how that operates. Well, if I don't know what comprehensive means, he's just speaking another language to me, which then inhibits my performance in the workplace. So it's very important that we understand the differences between these two. The other thing about casual register is that individuals will use a lot of nonverbal assists. So I don't know if you've had people in poverty stand in front of you and they are telling you a story. Oftentimes they're very animated. They're moving, they're doing arms, they're doing this kind of thing because they're using nonverbal assists. So if we're trying to help somebody move from casual register to formal register, how do you put down on paper what this arm movement may be in storytelling? Right? It's really hard to do that because they're using nonverbal assists. Because I do a lot of hand talking, so I get the nonverbal assists. So, now, how does that translate to those in poverty? Well, few individuals in lower class have the vocabulary or knowledge of sentence structure to use the formal register, which means they're operating in casual register almost all the time. And the majority of children in lower income families, that's all they're hearing. Their parents don't know how to use formal register. And in school, they're often getting just bypassed. We've had adults come through our programs that have graduated from our local schools in the surrounding area that can't read and write. How does that happen? I don't know, but it does. So here's where it really gets challenging because the ability to use formal register is a hidden rule. So if we're telling this person, why don't you just go get a job, and they can't communicate in the workplace, how are we helping that person? So because we expect that they know formal register. That's the hidden rule in middle class. And when an individual in lower class has conversations in casual register with their supervisor, and they don't get the responses back because the supervisor doesn't understand casual register, the new thing now is we just ghost that employer and go somewhere else. And I found out a few weeks ago, ghost means not showing up. And so it's not unusual for an employee to work at a place in Branson anyhow 3 or 4 days and not show up again and go to another place. And a lot of that is because of the lack of communication, because one, you're dealing with a class of individuals that is already dealing with low self-esteem. So they view themselves poorly, they view themselves with no self-worth, and when their supervisor can't communicate to them, they look at it as they're dumb, that they're stupid, so they won't come back to the job because they aren't in a place where they can have conversation with their supervisor. So it's really, really challenging. All right, so I talked a little bit about this. The formal register pattern is a speaker or writer gets to the point. It's very linear. It's beginning, middle, and end. Casual register is they go around the issue. It's very random and episodic. Here's where that comes into play. In the ability to plan. So if a individual doesn't have the cognitive skills and doesn't have the emotional skills, then they can't control their impulsivity. And if they don't have the ability to link time and task together and ask questions about a situation, they can't plan. So an example of that would be they have to be at work at 4 o'clock. At 3:30, they tell their boss, hey, I've got to run down to the social service office to get my unemployment or my welfare check filed, information filed, and then I'll be at work at 4. Well, probably not, right? 3:30 to 4, I don't know any social service office you can get in and out of in 30 minutes. But because of the lack of ability to link time and task, now it causes them to be late because, again, it's all about surviving. So I got to get that check filed. So they're going to choose that first and then show up to work. Well, they may not keep their job because they couldn't link time and task. So you can see how it all just kind of morphs together. So it's the lack of planning that really gets our individuals in poverty in trouble. And so when they come into your church or your organization and you're walking through these steps to tell them, well, here's what you need to go here and get this, and you need to go here and get this, you can't put it that way for them. You're going to have to take the time to break it down, to walk it through with them, to map out how to plan that out. Otherwise, you're setting that individual up for failure. Okay. So, we talked about that. All right, so here we go. If an individual depends upon random, episodic storytelling, like what we talked about, and they pull all of that from their memory patterns, then, and most of the time, someone in poverty lives in an unpredictable environment. They haven't developed the ability to plan, then it sets them on this path. If an individual cannot plan, they cannot predict, right? So the example I gave you, he didn't plan that it would take X amount of time, so he couldn't predict what the outcome would be if he didn't show up to work on time. And if you cannot predict, then they cannot identify cause and effect, meaning if I don't show up on time, I'll be fired. And if they cannot determine cause and effect, they cannot identify consequence. And if they can't identify consequence, they cannot control their impulsivity. And oftentimes, the lack of impulsivity leads to incarceration. Right? We see that time and time and time again. As a matter of fact, the language register is so key that statistically, if you cannot read and write by the 5th grade, you have a 70% chance of being incarcerated. 5th grade. So this is crucial to be able to understand our neighbors in poverty. So to help individuals make that transition, we have to offer support services that will help them with planning. We can't expect somebody to be able to manage their financial resources if they can't plan. Right? So I think I'm going to steal your thunder here, Chip, but Chip's going to tell you a story of a couple that received $8,000 and spent it in 24 hours because they didn't have the ability to plan. They couldn't budget. But the only way they're going to learn that is if somebody gets down in the trenches and spends the time doing that with them. It's not, in middle class, it's the expectation that we know that, but that's not the case in poverty class. And so you can see how, like, we'll see people that have $1,100 each month come on their SSI, card in their account, and they get it on the 3rd of the month, and by the 5th of the month, they're out of money. It's like, you just got $1,100. I don't understand how you're out of money. Well, that's how. So we have to do that. We have to be able to have the ability to speak into their life. But if we don't have a relationship there, if somebody came up to me and said, Bryan, you need to do this, and I didn't know them, even in middle class, it's going to be a little bit unacceptable, right, and invasive. But when you have a relationship with somebody, then you get the permission, you've earned the right to be able to coach and teach and mentor and guide them. And so for you to say to somebody that spent their SSI check in 2 days, say, well, you shouldn't have spent all that money, it's not going to do you any good. You haven't earned the right to be able to tell them what to do with that. Even though logically, yes, it makes sense. So you have to build one-to-one relationships. So the inability to plan and predict is why just go get a job or pull yourself up by your bootstraps won't work. Because money won't change behavior, and behavior won't change with a free handout. So you will constantly be handing out. And here's what you'll find is when you do that, it spreads like wildfire. And so, if a truck backed up over here and said they were going to give $10 out, I'm going to go get in line. And you know what? I'm going to call my wife and say, hey, you need to get in line too. That's $20. And she's going to call our kids and they're going to get in line. And so it not only does it not work, but it robs that person again of their dignity and value. All right, so as Bob Lupton goes on to say in this book, to achieve measurable change in the lives of the poor in our community, investment is required, both of them and of us. So it's financial investment. We got to hire staff probably. We have to invest in the community. We've got to find ways to run these organizations and services. Relationally, we've got to build into people. Physically, typically we've got to come alongside them. We got to spend time with them. And then spiritually, we've got to point them to that higher power.
What book was that?
Toxic Charity.
Okay, I want to
Yep.
make sure.
Yeah. A lot of this comes from, again, equal exchange. And so I've kind of added that to Bob Lupton's statement here, but he says never do for the poor what they could have or what they have or could have the capacity to do for themselves. Limit one way given to emergency situations. So I want to be clear on that. I'm not saying don't give, right? Sometimes there's reasons to give. So in a disaster situation, definitely want to give, right? We want to help somebody through that time of crisis. We want to make sure that they are fed, that they're clothed, that they have the basic needs. But then there's a tipping point, right, after that where we say, okay, now we've got you stable, now you need to do for yourself. And then I don't want to discount the God factor. So there are moments, I believe, where the Holy Spirit says that you need to do something for the individual standing in front of you. we just don't want every moment to be a God factor, because it's easy to do that. The thing about giving is it feels good. And there's even some scientific data, and Jesus tells us, right, that it's more blessed to give than receive. And there's some scientific data that says that when you give, it creates these endorphins that go off, and there's been some chemical analysis done that says, yeah, when you give, these things are higher level than when you receive. But I believe that we have responsibility in our giving. So I see a panhandler on the corner, and I feel like I need to give to him. I give him $20, and I feel good. I gave him $20. And he takes that $20, and he buys a bag of heroin laced with fentanyl, and he overdoses and dies. Should I still feel good about giving him that? I don't think so. Right? So I think we give, but we need to give responsibly. And that's the key to this. So limit one-way giving to emergency situations. Strive to empower the poor through employment and equal exchange. And I'm going to talk a little bit different ways, because I mentioned earlier about what employment looks like. Listen closely to those you seek to help, especially to what's not being said, and above all else, do no harm. So here's some things that we have implemented. So we have a program called Elevate Connections, and this is where we partner with 150 different agencies throughout Southwest Missouri. A lot of what that program does, though, is connect people to the DMV, to the health department for their birth certificate, to the DMV for an ID or driver's license, and to the Social Security office. Because those are the three things that are crucial to employment. Now, those things, except for the Social Security card, those things cost money. Of course, our Social Security office is in Springfield, so we have to figure out how to get there. So those three things cost money. Oftentimes, you're dealing with people who don't have any money. So we created what we call our rewards program. And this is where individuals can work on our campus and they earn rewards points. Basically, if you figure out for $1, it's a $5 basically an hour. And so we'll put them to work. We do an intake on them. We kind of assess what their physical skills are, or what they might be gifted with, and then we'll find them a duty. So for some people, it might be landscaping, pulling weeds, weed eating. For some, it might be mopping a floor, cleaning a bathroom. For others, it might be stapling packets together, or folding papers, or even coloring on bags that we pass out. So it just kind of depends on what it is. And then after they complete that work, we apply those points to the items that they are either looking for in the thrift store or towards their birth certificate or driver's license. Now, what we do is we limit it because we don't want it to replace employment. So they can only work, I think it's 4 hours a week.
That's what it says.
Is that what it says? Okay. So I think it's 4 hours a week that they can work there. That way it helps them, but doesn't prevent them from gaining full-time employment. So that's one program that we've done. If you have a food pantry, turn it into a co-op. Invite the members that are coming there for the free food to be part of it. You know, where they're packing it, they're unloading the trucks, they're doing something within the co-op itself to earn that food. We did this for several years, a Christmas store. So one of the things, and even Bob Lupton mentions this in the book, and we were guilty of this, we'll have people every year that call us to adopt a family that lives in a motel. And it's so demoralizing for the family. So they buy tons of presents, and then they usually want to be part of the gift giving, and so they show up and they go knock on the door and they give the gift, and if there happens to be a dad in the family, he's out. And the kids are receiving the gifts, and the kids are pretty excited, right? And the mom's kind of like, I'm the poor little lady here that you middle class people are providing for Christmas, and it just feels icky, you know. And then oftentimes what will happen is the mom and dad will take those presents back to wherever if they came from Walmart, and they'll get the cash because they need the cash for something else. And so what we did is we created a Christmas store. We were able to get some donors to put together some financial resources. We got some things donated, and we had not only toys, but we also had toiletries and clothing and different things. And we offered it at a discounted rate, like 20 cents on the dollar. And mom and dad could come in, they could shop, the kids could shop, they would pay 20 cents on the dollar for that stuff. If they couldn't pay, then they got to work in the Christmas store to earn those gifts. So, just an idea for you. Kids Buck Store. So we have a kids program as well. And so kids earn bucks for good behavior, doing their homework, reading a book, and then they get to use those bucks to buy stuff out of the Buck Store, which could be, again, toiletries, clothing, games, whatever. Most of the time, it's food. It's not even stuff for them. A volunteer work program. We believe it's very important to get the very people that you're serving involved in what you do and work alongside them. So create opportunities where they can work with you and volunteer. If your church has a maintenance guy, have him mentor somebody. We have a maintenance guy, and he'll have people all day long working side by side, earning the reward points, but just hanging out. It's a great opportunity for him to speak into their lives and talk about God when the opportunity arises. And then, of course, the rewards program. How am I doing on time there, Micah?
About 5 minutes.
Oh, we're about done. All right, so one of the other things that I would recommend is coming up with a program or class to teach people skills, the soft skills. So we started in 2013 with what we call Elevate Work, but we started with a curriculum called Jobs for Life. And it's a national program. It's out there. It's relatively inexpensive for churches. I even think True Charity has a resource for Jobs for Life. We did that for about 8-9 years, and then we've learned a lot through that and really been able to tweak the curriculum and rewrite it and kind of do what fits us. But it's all about soft skills. It's all, the things that middle-class employers expect you to know, those hidden rules that are unsaid. Again, show up on time, how to dress appropriately, how to not ghost your employer. It teaches them how to talk about themselves in a positive light, because oftentimes if an employer said, "Tell me about yourself," they're going to say something like, "Well, I got out of prison, a year ago, and I was in there for, methamphetamine, but I'm clean now." It's like, no, let's not do that. Let's talk about what you are doing now. And so we help them through all that kind of stuff. And so there's lots of stuff on our website about our Elevate Work program. Okay, so a lot of you in here probably remember this story about Jessica in the well.
Yeah.
Since I'm speaking to my age group instead of Micah's age group, his age group, who's the baby well? So I use this as just an example to say, this was a little girl, if you don't know, that fell into this tiny little hole in Midland, Texas in the well, got stuck, and the community started to rally together to get her unstuck. And it became really a nationwide rescue effort. The entire country came together to get her unstuck. They brought drilling rigs from all over the country, and it was on the national news, and it was broadcast live, and they even celebrated when she got out of the well. I mean, it was like there were hundreds of people there. Rescuers were clapping, everybody was clapping. They rushed her to the hospital. They're clapping on her arrival. They're just celebrating that. And I say that to say that's how we need to treat our neighbors in need. We need to climb down into the well with them, get them unstuck, and when they take one step forward, we need to celebrate that with them. Because it goes back to, we don't know what they don't know. And I remember in one of our first job classes, this kid by the name of Daryl comes in, he's got a ball cap on, and we make him tell why they're there. And he has a microphone and he's kind of mumbling and his head's down, and I'm like, he's not gonna make it. He's out. You know, he might. I'd be surprised if he even comes back. I was so wrong. He not only did he finish the class, he was probably the best student in the class. So after his graduation, he's walking out the door. I pat him on the back and I said, "Man, great job, Daryl. I'm really proud of you for finishing this class." He stops in the middle of the door. It's swinging back at him. He turns to me and he says, "Nobody's ever told me that in my life." It just crushed me. It was like, whoa. You know, and so it's so important that we celebrate the wins from our neighbors and not just expect it because that's what they should do, but to celebrate the fact that they did it. And that's the story of Jessica and the well. It was just how that everybody came together in that community to really rally behind her. So this is something real quick, and I'm about wrapped up here, Micah. Out of the book again, this is a great way to check yourself as a church or organization. So these are things that we'll also look at through the lens. Are we building relationships, or are we just giving stuff out? Are we providing next steps to those that come looking for help? Are we finding solutions for the betterment of the community? So in our community, there's 3 talking points. It's workforce, because we have a shortage in Branson. It's affordable housing, and it's transportation. And so we've had the work program for quite a while. We're in the process of building a tiny house development that will encompass workforce opportunities, and we're bringing a transportation solution for the poor next year using mopeds. And it'll be $5 a day, and it includes all of their insurance and everything. So, and then, you know, are we requiring an investment from those being served? And then are we allowing them to serve with us? Because when it's one side of the table, it doesn't work. We're robbing that person. But when we can do it side by side, then there's equality in that. And so here's some additional resources. You can go to our website at elevatebranson.org. There's a lot of information on there. We also have a weekly podcast. You can get to it through the website, or you can go to Branson Podcast Network. And we talk about a lot of what I tried to cram in here in a short time in a series of podcasts. We also have a branding license opportunity where we will actually license our programs and what we do. And then, of course, True Charity is a great resource for everything I talked about. They've got tons and tons of already created material. And so if your church or organization is not part of that, I'd really recommend it. And I'll just wrap up with, if anybody's got any quick questions. I've also got some handouts up here if you want those. Yeah.
I was wondering, with these programs that where people volunteer and then they get credit in a certain amount of money, has there ever been a concern raised that could run afoul of minimum wage laws?
No.
Okay.
So they don't get any money. So we don't give them money.
Okay.
We're actually just applying it to what they need.
Okay. So as long as you're giving them things and not money,
Right.
You're okay.
Yep. So far. That'll be my caveat so far. Yeah.
There's probably an element too, like since you're capping it at like a max of 4 hours a week too, like I mean, it's impossible to even like work say part-time.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's something we've kicked around a little bit because minimum wage is $11 an hour, and we do believe in equal exchange as much as possible. But you can buy a lot of things in a thrift store for $11.
Yeah.
And so we've kind of backed it off of that, also to balance out. Like we have some people that we're just affording them an opportunity so that they can keep their dignity and value intact by folding papers, right? We wouldn't pay somebody $11 an hour to fold papers. Now, somebody who is landscaping for us, yeah, right? So we just kind of have found that happy medium area. So far, it's working well. But it's something that we always wrestle with, is the value of it.
Do you have any partnerships with local businesses
We do. We have a lot of them.
That's something I'm really interested in, but I haven't seen anybody actually implement.
Yeah, so we offer, like for business partnerships, we offer for them to send their employees through our work programs. And we also just launched a program called Elevate Entrepreneurs, which is a partnership through Rising Tide out of New Jersey, which actually helps people create their own business. So yeah, and I can talk to you more about that.
Do you have any resources for legal assistance
I don't. I would, what I would try to do is find a local attorney that has a heart for that and just try to.
because that can be an issue for no matter what situation they are in life now. If they've had a legal problem in the past, so they're restricted on where they can live and or even their employment.
Yeah, and it's a huge, that's a whole nother day's topic, but the criminal justice system is a huge way of keeping poor people trapped.
Yeah.
So we had a guy that came through our work program that had been booked and fingerprinted over 90 times. And God got a hold of him, flipped his life upside down. He wanted to clean everything up. He had no transportation to get to the courthouse. I became his ride. And then it took over the course of 9 months for him to plead guilty. Just to plead, he's like, I just want to plead guilty, do the time, whatever I need to do to start moving forward. 9 months, and it took probably 18 trips to court. And if he didn't have transportation, any one of those times, he would have had a warrant for his arrest, thrown back in.
We're dealing with an individual who has a legal issue that could be expunged according to the research that my wife has done. But we have no resources to do that.
Yeah, just try to find a local attorney that has a heart for helping people. That would be my best suggestion. All right, thanks, Micah.
Yep. So if you guys have additional questions, again, you got those index cards. Thank you so much, Bryan. Elevate Branson is an excellent place. If you ever get a chance to visit them, I would strongly encourage you guys to do that. They are very hospitable to show folks around to see firsthand what they're doing. But yeah, and again, we are going to have a panel discussion after Chip's presentation as well. And so if you have additional questions you're dying to ask about, like, hey, what's this look like at Elevate, or just write those on the card, and we'll have an opportunity to ask those at the end here. So let's go ahead and pray, and then we'll grab some lunch. Dear Father, thank you so much for this morning that we've had, a chance to worship you, to encounter your word, and just to hear from others that are doing this hard work, because as we've heard, it is messy work. And whether we're doing it in our churches or at a nonprofit or just in our own personal lives, we know that you promise to be with us. Your Holy Spirit will guide us, and I ask that you continue to be with us as we sort out how to best love our neighbors and build relationships with them. Also, bless this food to our bodies that we're about to eat, and be with us this afternoon as we continue to learn and to grow. In Jesus' name, amen.